Okay, thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen and share an updated agenda with all of you to approve, largely because it's changed quite a bit or had additions and the revisions made to it since I shared it with the council and all of you earlier this week. So I want to make sure we all approve it as listed up. Okay, well, I'm hoping and trust that Secretary Clauser will join us as the meeting moves on. She is planning to be with us, and Julie is on vacation for a few days, so I know she couldn't join us today. Marion was thoughtful and reminded me that the last time we met, in addition to approving the minutes from November 5th, we also still need to approve the minutes from when we met on October 29th because of a issue with the way they were linked to the last time we met. Hoping then to dive into the letter that Liz put together on behalf of you all to ensure that we're moving in the right direction, ensure that the feedback on that is appropriate so that we can put forward a final draft, I should say, for the council's consideration this coming Tuesday on the 16th. Want to talk with you all a little bit about some of the outstanding issues for this initial climate action plan, including the appendices as well as the glossary, and determine a path forward for how we address those for December 1st or perhaps after December 1st. And then also start to look at the agendas for next week's meeting, as well as considering the need for, you got it, an additional council meeting before December 1st, which feels like an oversight when I will speak to the schedule in front of us, the need for us to come together before we actually adopt the plan on the 1st, and then talk with you briefly about a proposed schedule for December meetings after the adoption of the plan on the 1st. Barring any other public comment, hopefully we can wrap up and be done by 4 o'clock. Any changes or additions or questions about the agenda as it's put forward? And obviously, David couldn't be with us today. He's actually facilitating his first in-person all-day meeting since COVID and wasn't able to join us. And all the CBI staff were also booked with other meetings. So you have me today to help guide you through this agenda. But okay, I'm going to stop sharing then, and we can jump right in. I'll put this link if Marion hasn't already. Oh, I can't put the link. There it goes. Copy. I'll stop sharing. Put this in the chat, and based on that, both the minutes for October 29th and November 5th. Hi, Secretary Clauser. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
The minutes for October 29th and the minutes for November 5th are both linked in the meeting agenda. Recognizing the November 5th meeting minutes were linked already, but the October 29th were a late addition. Hopefully, folks have had a chance over the course of the last week or so to review those, and any suggestions or comments on those are appreciated. Hearing none, I will take those as approved, so thanks. So the first thing we were going to do is recognize and appreciate that the steering committee has the role of drafting the opening letter for the climate action plan. This will be the first component in this initial cap that folks and readers will look at. And so Liz has taken the lead on drafting an initial outline and draft for that, knowing that there have been some conversations and considerations of what should be lifted up in this letter and the composition of it. Thought that we could use this time to talk through the general components and tenets as Liz framed them, and then hear any feedback or conversation on the draft and where we want to go with it in order to have it posted on Tuesday with the next round of documents for review by the council. So Liz, if I might ask you just to frame up your initial thoughts on what you put forward in that. It's linked in the agenda as well as posted online. I also have it open on my computer, and when and if ready, I'm happy to open it and take some comments or notes in it as we talk through.
Sure. I think I had the either benefit or detriment, depending on how you look at it, of just picking up the pen first. There had been a group of us who had, volunteered to take on the task of the initial draft. And so I say that because while I would always say, hey, no pride of authorship and, please edit away and let's talk about it, I really, 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 really mean it for this draft, because I put it out there hoping to get some initial comments from the rest of the group that had volunteered, and I think we all just schedule-wise were not able to accomplish that. So what you're seeing is not only a first draft, but like a really raw, not quite ready for primetime draft, in my view. And having undersold it sufficiently, I did try to, at least in high level, hit areas that I thought we'd want to cover, while keeping it brief and relatively, not terribly colorful, for the initial draft, just to get people's reaction on areas that we're missing. I know that Jared has had a chance to look at it, and I think Lauren as well. And I don't think there's anything to do but improve it from here on out. So I don't need to say more. I think we should just get reaction and then really decide who's taking the next, like how we're managing edits, so that we can get a closer to final, at least, better from the steering council's point of view, draft to give to the council, where I'm sure it will get further, massage.
Thanks, Liz, for that. Jared?
Thanks, Jane. Yeah, first, I just want to thank Liz for taking the first, doing the first drafting. I think it's a great start. Before we get too far into this conversation, I was thinking it could be helpful to just have a little bit more context in two ways. One is if we could look at the flow of the CAP outline and look at where this falls and what comes before and after it, because I think part of like what we want to make sure is in the letter will depend in part on kind of what other pieces may be covered in the executive summary, or like I'm really trying to start by getting my head around who is the audience for this letter and what are the most important goals of the letter, and that's relative to some of the other sections in the CAP. So thank you, Jane, for pulling that up. I guess my one thing that I've just had in the back of my head in terms of audience is we have been so internally focused as a council, as subcommittees, as members of the public who've been joining these meetings. And I feel like the release of the climate action plan is going to be the first time when we're really speaking to the whole of Vermont, and the audience isn't any longer fellow council members, fellow subcommittee members, the people who've been, the relatively small but very, important, and I'm very grateful for them, folks who have been following these deliberations. And I just want to make sure that this letter is speaking to kind of what this plan means for Vermont and Vermonters, and isn't too kind of reflective on our internal process. I think there should be some of that. I think we're going to have to do more debrief about how we can improve our processes going forward. But I do want to make sure that either in the letter or in the executive summary, we're talking about what the climate action plan is and what the recommendations are and what it means for Vermont and Vermonters on a substance level, not just kind of a reflection on the process level.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe just since, before I go to you, Chris, I'll just suggest that Marion and I have been talking and thinking about our assignments in the coming days and over the weekend, what we'll be working on this weekend. And I am tasked with putting forward for the council's consideration on Tuesday the flow and outline for the executive summary, recognizing that a lot lies on an executive summary and don't want to just put that forward as a whole document. Would love to get input from the council and all of you on what that looks like. And in my current thinking on that, I have appreciated that, and Marion and I just talked about this today, that the process itself is not really, it's not easy to pull that out from the executive summary itself. So I'm actually going to, in my outline and thinking about how to draft the executive summary over the weekend, include the process as part of that. Marion's going to actually, and I'm going to try to put as much detail to that as possible for Tuesday. So folks, because we know you'll want to have input directly on that draft, put that forward on Tuesday as one document, and Marion's going to work specifically on the using this plan piece, which in and of itself is a heavy lift of drafting sort of the articulation of how the public should pick up the document and use it. So just real-time edits to the outline as we move towards the December 1st. So Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it says what I think y'all did a great job. Thank you so much, Liz, for leading the effort and whoever contributed to it. The only thing I would like to add, and I can suggest, and it's just a little bit of language, and I can suggest some, is in the next to last paragraph, it talks about we adopted several concrete actions with wide consensus designed to promote mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, and we look forward, which I hope all that's going to be true, and we look forward to implementation by the legislature, state agencies, and their partners. I just would like to add, maybe it's another brief sentence about the importance of the public and frontline communities and basically the people you allude to in that paragraph before that, engaging in those processes as well. Because we talked about that a good bit in just transitions, and too often in planning efforts, we do the upfront public engagement, the development of the plan, and then everybody kind of gets left off in the other pieces to actually implement plans. And I just would like to add a brief sentence to that effect. So I'll draft that and get it to you, I guess, Liz and Jane, and then you can figure out if you want to include it or not.
Thank you for that, Chris. And one other comment, Jared, maybe you spoke to this in your remarks as I was pulling up the outline and missed it. But one of the other tensions I know that we spoke to around what to include in a letter versus the executive summary is like a summary of the top recommendations that are coming out of the climate action plan. And just wanted to highlight also, because I didn't say this about the executive summary, that will surely be in the executive summary, sort of the priority actions, a summary of those in the executive summary. So not necessary in the letter.
And going to what Chris said, it's difficult to write that until we have them. I think we have a sense of what we think many of them will be, but we don't yet have perfect clarity or certainty.
Yeah, Jane, I'm sorry, it's Liz. I can't raise my hand on the phone, but that is a question I had, and it sounds like you all have answered it. But is there any other pieces of front matter besides the executive summary in this letter? Because I had thought when we talked about this letter, at least my impression in drafting it was that it was supposed to be short and not include that type of substance. But I agree with Jared that we got to make sure it's included somewhere. So is there another letter from anybody, like either the secretary or, I don't know, anything else? Or is it just literally the exact sum in this?
No, as of now, we're just proposing the letter from the council. You'll remember that we, in previous iterations of the draft, we had a letter from the governor also. Through past conversations, we thought because this is a council-led project process, that it should more appropriate just to be from the council. So we removed that. And then we just have the executive summary after this letter, then transitioning right into the introduction of the plan right now.
Okay, so this is literally the first thing someone picking it up might read if they start at the front.
Yes.
Okay. With that, then with that, it seems to me like it's hard because you don't want it to be too long, and therefore have to start. I'm concerned that when we talk with the council about it on Tuesday, if you start to go down the road of including information, it's going to be really hard to pull back, like in terms of what information gets included and what doesn't. So it might just be we need a roadmap of what, maybe we just need to say something not only acknowledging, all of those who did participate, despite the fact that some of the process was less than ideal for the reasons described. Also, just pointing the reader to the most important thing to turn to, like literally, and maybe this is just a bracket for now, but, as described on page X, like seriously, just, the top level, because there's probably going to be a really, hopefully very succinct portion of the exec sum to point to. Just an idea.
Perfect. Lauren?
Yeah, I'm inclined to keep the letter pretty short. And I guess the way that I'm thinking about it is like, there's a title page that will look prettier come March than it will in December 1st. A one-page letter, and then like the table of contents and like the meat of the plan. And I think that specifics that are included in the plan should be called out in the executive summary and not necessarily here. So that with that in mind, I really appreciate the way that Liz framed it up, hitting some high level points that should be made in a letter, but not getting into the weeds of what's actually in the plan yet.
Yeah, that jives exactly with what I'm thinking, and I feel like that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like there's consensus from all of you around how to frame the letter up, and maybe we should just shift towards how we finalize it for putting it forward for the council's consideration on Tuesday. And just so you know, to clarify, because I heard perhaps Liz suggesting that this would be discussed on Tuesday, it's not proposed to be discussed till the 23rd, where the 23rd will have a comprehensive draft go to the council, and in it we'll be able to highlight the few remaining components of the cap itself that haven't been reviewed independently yet, of which there will not be many. There will be the executive summary and this letter. And so those will be the two components on the 23rd that we'll dive deep into reaching consensus around, as well as putting forward the full body of the climate action plan that has all the revisions made to the individual sections, which have already come to the council to date. So Liz, before I volunteer you, you took the initial pen to paper on this. Would you be willing, interested, able to manage edits to put forward a final draft for Tuesday based on steering committee feedback sent to you directly?
I'm hesitant only because I'm not at my house this weekend. And you want to when do you want to post it? Sorry, tell me your posting date.
Yeah, we've been we say Tuesday night, but it's been Wednesday midday typically the last 2 weeks.
For the following week. Okay.
Yep.
I gotcha. Well then, yeah, probably I can do that as long as it doesn't have to be this weekend in case I can't get to it. The thing that would be helpful to me, but if you disagree on process, just let me know. The way we did the matrix, where it was a shared online Word document that multiple people could edit, was actually really helpful, I thought, and would give access to those counselors who want to, and it has a way to track changes, and I would be happy to make decisions as changes are put in and, reconcile. But that would actually give all of the steering council members that who wanted some agency on their edits. So could we do that?
Yes, we can create a SharePoint document.
I very much, that would be great. That would be great. It's definitely not quote my letter. That's for darn sure. Yeah. Okay, that's great. I'd be happy to manage that if you send out a SharePoint link.
Yes. We will do that right after this call. And that way it's up there and available for folks to make edits over the weekend. Let's say, Liz, giving you the time, why don't we give the steering committee itself through Monday, midday to make edits. And then Liz, that would give you a day and a half. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Well, that was great. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda was to discuss other components of the climate action plan that are not necessary, perhaps, to have completely drafted for December 1st, and wanted to consider with all of you what we would commit to for December 1st and what we would like to think about punting to after December 1st for further work. And Marion and I have been thinking a lot about both the main two components of that as first, the glossary for the climate action plan, and then second, the compilation of all of the appendices for the climate action plan, of which there are many to date. We're trying to keep a running list of those, as well as have to think about approval of that list and formatting so that they all, like the matrices from subcommittees as well as other documents, all align and are easy to put into the climate action plan. So what we're suggesting at this point is to consider, for the glossary itself specifically, is that we would put forward on the timeline in the climate action plan outline a list of terms for the glossary, that we could have consensus around what the terms are that we're going to provide definitions for in the climate action plan, but then work to reach consensus on how we define the terminology after December 1st, knowing that some of the terms can be lifted straight from the Global Warming Solutions Act itself, but other terms will need some work to bring forward definitions from subcommittees to reach agreement on first and foremost, and then the council. So we actually see it as a multiple step process to get agreement on definitions. That's one that doesn't give us enough time right now to work through. So Marion's been working with DEC staff to put together and maintain a spreadsheet for the terms that we have been highlighted through the drafting of specific sections for the CAP, as well as through lifting up through subcommittees directly. So we have that. We'd like to put that forward. And then we'd also like to ask the steering committee if there's any objection to not pulling together appendices till after December 1st, as well as the final definitions.
Right. We'll look into that.
Would the appendices include some of the substantive reports that consultants have done?
Yes. Yeah, the appendices will include the technical reports done by the consultants. They will also include the matrix that have all of the actions, some of which weren't lifted into the body of the climate action plan. There are some lengthier drafts that are being put forward, like the economic report that Ken Jones helped write for this section that's up right now. There's a lengthier piece there that we were considering for an appendix. That's pretty much it. Subcommittee work, technical analysis reports, public engagement findings, those sorts of documents. But it's largely the matrices that will need some work to align them to get them formatted for the climate action plan itself. Chris?
Yeah, I'd be in favor of technical reports being put out with the plan personally, if possible.
The technical reports, we will have a draft technical report next week for the LEAP modeling and the economic modeling, and the final reports are not due till December. So just as a FYI. So I actually don't even know, based on the schedule we have with our consultants, if the technical reports will be ready to go out on December 1st.
I mean, maybe this
Something
is
I'll
too,
have to follow up on.
maybe this is too simplistic, but I mean, it sounds like some of these things are what they are, and we should just include as appendices the pieces that are ready and say that the ones that are not, note that they will be coming, and if we have a date for them, include it.
Chris?
If that's the case, I mean, that doesn't even just have to be late. I think we need to give a date certain, a hard date by which point all the appendices will be gathered and final, so that it's not happening by dribs and drabs. So that way, for the general public and press releases and everything else, we can say, here's the plan. There are other things still coming. We will have those to you by a fixed date.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and it feels really reasonable to say that we would have the appendices within 2 weeks or something very short term after December 1st. But the actual mountain of having the technical reports reviewed in detail at the same time we're producing the CAP, as well as all the appendices themselves, formatting and getting them ready, feels slightly unrealistic right now to me to have it ready by December 1st.
Maybe the specific concern I have is whether the GHG and social cost of carbon ones are included in the ones that wouldn't get released until later. I'm thinking of other recommendations in actually more than one place that, including in the sections in cross-sector that refer to that. Are those also ones that would not, like, would we hold back the ones that are done in order to put them all out, or could we put out the ones that are done, to Chris's point?
Nope. Yeah, those are done. Those are the social cost of carbon and the cost of carbon report are done, and we have those as final. What we don't have yet is the final report for the greenhouse gas emissions reductions, as well as the economic modeling. We get a draft next week.
So the greenhouse gas one that we've seen, I think we saw it in August, didn't we?
We haven't seen the
that's the one
report yet. We've only seen.
Oh, I see. There's a written
So
draft we haven't
there's
seen.
two
Okay.
there's two different things. One is the initial report on the existing inventory and on potential supplemental analysis, which is final. I think what Jane is referring to
Yeah.
is the assessment of the emissions reduction potential of the pathway strategies and action, which has generally been completed, but is being kind of finally typed up, and we should have a draft of by Monday.
Got it. I was referring to the one that you mentioned first, Jared, the one that has the further action and recommendations on the methodology.
Yeah, that's good. That's final and ready to go. And I think I think we've already even included those cap section drafts that reference it, reviewed them as the council and approved them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's referenced in some of our cross sector as well. That's why I was hoping that at least it could be ones that are referenced like that could be released at the same time. Otherwise it feels funny.
So
Agreed.
I don't have any problem with, I've been saving those as they come in an appendices, like multiple places to have what we know are going to be reports that are final for appendices. And so I guess the question to me is, could we release the final list of appendices with the initial climate action plan, include the ones that we have, and have an exact date for when the others would be included, and have that not be more than 2 weeks after the initial cap, so that we know that the complete appendices will be done in short term right after the initial cap is adopted. Maureen?
2 questions. First, is the carbon budget going to be ready as is for 12/1? And
Yes.
the second is to Chris's point, which I really appreciate, making sure that we're putting out like a firm date through which all of the additional analyses are incorporated. Do we have an idea from the Science and Data Subcommittee recommendations for the RFI and the RFP, what the timeline and process is for that?
So the RFI is something that we've said we could move on whenever, and that's really been capacity driven. DEC staff are helping take the lead on that first on behalf of Science and Data, and have been key to drafting sections, so haven't worked on the RFI yet. So that's something that is immediate and pending. The RFP is not dissimilar from all the other technical analyses that we hope to do, which includes what the RFI will lead to, likely another RFP, and will be a priority for the council to consider amongst all of the technical analysis needs that are being put forward and lifted up in this climate action plan, and understanding based on the budget that we have, what are the short-term priorities for us to move forward with. So because there's many technical analyses next steps that we want to do with the remaining GWSA budget that we have, and then future GWSA technical analysis services. So no timeline for the RFP, except in that it's within the pot of other technical analyses that the council will need to weigh and consider what to move forward with first. So hearing no other comment, I guess I'll ask, are folks okay with, first and foremost, the glossary? If for the initial cap on the first, if we have the full agreed upon suite of terms that we want to include in the glossary, and then assume that we could put forward the same date that we would consider for the technical, well, I shouldn't say technical, any appendices that we're not able to include on December 1st with the initial cap, we would include the same date that those would be finalized and included, as well as that to be the same date that the glossary terms would be finalized, assuming that date to be no more than 2 weeks after the initial cap to be adopted. Just buying a little bit of time. Hearing no objection, I'm going to take the 2 weeks and run with it. But appreciate Liz and Jared and everybody's points about the technical service reports, ones that we have and that are so critical to the draft, that we'll make sure we include the carbon budget, the greenhouse gas inventory, and all of that with the initial caps, since those are final and ready to go. Okay, so the other thing we want to talk about today is really the schedule, as well as the agendas for the upcoming meetings. I'm more than happy to share the agendas as I have them drafted and linked in the agenda. If you would all like to talk through those for the next 2 weeks, next 2 meetings, I should say, but then would really also like to focus your time and energy on considering one additional meeting between now and December 1st, as well as what the agendas and schedule should look like immediately after December 1st. Chris, before I do so, go ahead. I think you're muted, Chris, if you're talking.
I'm looking at the agendas now. Shoot, that's a lot.
Let me share it. I'll share my screen so we can look at them together. Let's see. I'll do the 16th first.
So I'm not trying to be provocative. I'm just, I see that, you know, even going into November 17th, is there still a meeting on the 23rd?
Yes, there's a meeting on the 23rd.
So we talk about discussion on the 16th and 17th, but I don't see anything about decisions. So I gather that means we're all decisions on what goes in the climate action plan is going to be on the 23rd.
Well, 23rd will be the first time my understanding from the council and the direction of the council has been to date that until you see a comprehensive draft of the climate action plan, which includes all of the components as well as now the revisions to those components that have come forward, that nobody wanted to take action on individual sections of the climate action plan. So we've been proceeding that we've been trying to do our best to raise issues, resolve issues, so that there will be little conflict when the comprehensive cap comes forward, but no action until it does. And that's how we've been proceeding. And so the first time that the complete comprehensive cap will come to the council has been, we've been saying, the 23rd of November. But that will include, you will have at that point seen every section in the cap. All of those issues and gaps and components will have been raised and discussed, and revisions to the best of everybody's ability will have been made. My suggestion, based on what I put in the agenda today, is that 23rd feels like we'll still have to look at the executive summary and reach consensus on that component, as well as the letter from the council. Hopefully that won't be anything too challenging. But my suggestion is that we hold a meeting not on the 30th, but actually on the 29th, which is a Monday, because that way, if there are any outstanding issues, we start to move through and vote on components. And that would give Marion and I 2 days to make any revisions to have a clean draft on the 1st for adoption. Because otherwise what happens is the plan goes out on the 23rd as a comprehensive draft to you all. We discuss, but don't really substantively get at anything. And then there's no chance for you to get one clean copy on the 1st. So I am proposing that we have a meeting on the 29th that really has given folks the Thanksgiving holiday to review and look at the climate action plan in a comprehensive form. And between now and then, we start to really think about what it's going to mean to adopt individual sections. But my hope is that counselors have been raising their red flags along the way, and that individual conversations and public conversations and discourse have moved us to appreciate the plan for consensus as a whole by the 23rd and then ultimately the 29th.
Okay. I mean, I hope you're right too. And Jane, this is not on you. I mean, so when I say I hope you're right, I mean for all of us, I hope you're right. I I guess I would suggest though, on these next two meetings, we, to some extent, as part of whoever's running the meetings, really kind of need to ask some pointed questions like, you know, counselors, how committed are you to what you're seeing here, to get a bit better sense about where folk are at, to get a better handle on where we're heading for on the 23rd. I'll just note for the record, I can't be there on the 23rd. I'm not asking for anything to change because I can't be there, but I'll be traveling to see my wife's family, which we've not seen for 2 years, and her dad died during this COVID period. So I'm not postponing that trip because of this council. But one other, and Secretary Clouser, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but just a question I've got as far as the 8 administration representatives on the council. I think there's 8 that represent the administration and 15 that are appointed by the House and Senate. Do you have any, I'm not trying to be provocative, I'm just thinking everybody's working for the same boss. Generally speaking, is there going to be a consensus among the administration appointee representatives around the policies, or are the different secretaries and commissioners expected to kind of vote their own, or vote or agree or disagree on their own?
No, there will likely be consensus among the executive appointees.
Because I bring it up because in the interest of time, and again, I'm not trying to be provocative at all, but in the interest of time, if there are real concerns within the administration, folk especially, it might be good, the sooner you can let folk, the council know, the better. Because I feel like I'm definitely feeling some of that or hearing some of that during council meetings. It'd be really good to know, so that we generally know where we're going to need to have votes, where we can find, and where we're going to have to, where we're going to be able to find consensus, because that might help advise the process that needs to be gone through on the 23rd and the 29th. You know, do we have consensus on these items? Or are we going to actually put it to a majority, you know, vote on these other items? And just a reminder too, because this is, as a public official, this is my life, those votes are going to have to be roll call votes. So I'm just thinking ahead about process. And Jane, hopefully this helps you. I'm just trying to, as our coordinator, and you know, just kind of think through how to make the most of that time.
Thanks, Chris. Lauren, go ahead.
Well, that sparked a lot of thought, Chris. Jane, if I heard you right, the 23rd is largely for review of the complete draft of the plan. And any voting that may or may not occur would happen on the meeting that you're proposing on the 29th, that Monday.
I can't really, I don't want to say that definitively yet, but as of right now, I see that likely as what the outcome will be, but we need to talk through that a bit about how that's going to flow and how we're going to move to that kind of adoption of the plan. So there could be votes that happen on the 23rd.
Okay. And then I guess I would just ask, as you're considering that process and flow and what that might look like, to Chris's point about roll call votes and how that will take place, just to consider if we're being asked to vote on entire sections as a whole swath, or if we're voting on individual actions that have been flagged as controversial or unresolved by counselors.
Yeah, I think that's really critical, Lauren. I think that's really important to raise. And I know that Secretary Moore and Secretary Young and now Secretary Clouser are working behind the scenes around issues that are challenging for the administration and vice versa around the edges. And so I'd like to think that we're moving to be able to adopt by consensus the components of the climate action plan as a whole, and aren't going to go action by action through, but it'll be beholden, as David and I have said in the past, on counselors to raise out the issue within the section that would prevent them from doing so. And that's why we were feeling it especially important to hold a meeting on the 29th, because if we haven't been able to get to consensus on the package as a whole, and there are components that are still going to need to be pulled out or re-envisioned, we want to make sure we do that with enough time to do the plan, revise the plan accordingly. So hearing this discussion, do folks in general, happy to share the 17th agenda too up on the screen, but largely very similar to the 16th in that we'll be able to finish off cross-sector issues and gaps, which, as you'll all remember, we were only able to get through largely through buildings and thermal, but we didn't even finish going through issues and gaps associated with the buildings and thermal sector. So we reserved Tuesday's agenda to go substantively deep on transportation in addition to cross-cutting pathways. And then Wednesday, we'll come back and finish up buildings and thermal, and then have a hard conversation on non-energy, which also has some really interesting issues that have been raised that we'll need to address. And then have some time at the end of the meeting for more free-form conversation about anything else from subcommittees, actions that have been brought forward that councilors still feel are unresolved and want to discuss. So, and knowing that that day, the revised documents for rural resilience and Ag and Eco, all of that will have been posted, so folks can elevate or raise issues still that are outstanding in the revised draft. And I think the only other thing on Wednesday of substance is that we've confirmed with Leslie Ann and Jay that they'll be willing to present the climate change upfront section of the climate action plan on Wednesday as well. So we'll be able to see that. Yeah, I very much agree with you, Chris, and we've been trying really hard to get folks to speak up to issues. And I do think we've been able to move on, different components of actions so far to make resolution, I think, and we've seen that with the subcommittee's revised draft. So hopefully councilors will feel pleased with the updated version. Great.
And Jane, just, and again, I think you've been clear. I think everybody's been clear about the importance of the surveys and speaking up. My fear, and this has nothing to do with this council or anybody else, it's just having having been a planner for a few decades now and having done it in many jurisdictions on many topics, just how many people will wait until the last minute to speak up. And it's just human nature. I don't know how to fix it. And then still some others will speak up after folks to that. But so I think it's up to us as a steering committee to just really press our fellow counselors that it's critical to speak up now so that this thing doesn't go off the rails at the last hour.
Lauren.
Yeah, I was going to make a similar comment to Chris and note that even if counselors have indicated a need for further clarity or pause for concern around any action, and it has been discussed more or less at the council level, that doesn't necessarily mean that consensus has been met yet. So I want that to be conveyed very clearly to people too, to Chris's point of what they are not agreeing to. So just because it's been discussed doesn't mean we've agreed or met consensus on any one action item or strategy or pathway.
Okay, so understanding all of this conversation, are there any edits or revisions for next week's agenda that we could make to improve upon clarity to the process, or anything to lift up so that folks really get the critical nature of the moment that we're in to raise these issues? Understanding that also, do I have your support to schedule a meeting on Monday, the 29th?
I think it's essential.
Great.
Yeah, how long do you think that meeting should be? That's a question for Jane and or steering committee members. If that's the one where potentially all of our voting is going to be squeezed into.
24 hours.
Yeah, I would reserve the day. I mean, I would really reserve the work day.
I see
And then if
Secretary
it
Clouser.
doesn't happen, then we've got downtime, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Jane,
sorry,
no, go ahead, Secretary Clouser.
realistically, it has to be at least 4 hours, I would think. If we're, especially if we're roll calling votes and there's discussion, and I think it, I'm not sure we can ask people to be available the entire day, but it's certainly a substantial meeting. So I would think 4 hours is probably the baseline.
That's great. My original suggestion was, knowing that we did meet Monday afternoons until we met to move to Tuesday afternoons, was to suggest scheduling a meeting that afternoon. But open to time suggestions, and happy, even though I'm often resident to poll, knowing how futile polling is with such a busy group, more than happy knowing that we're looking at a narrow day and know that that's the day to try to suggest some windows of time to see how to accommodate as many counselors as possible that day, if that seems like the best way to go.
I think
Jane,
the
I
only
was
issue with
just
that
gonna-
approach is if we start in the afternoon, then our only opportunities to bleed significantly into the evening versus starting in in the first half of the day and going into the afternoon. Which I can do either. I'm like Chris, I'm gonna block my whole day off not knowing, but
I will suggest that we start then at 8:30, which is seems like a reasonable start time. I can have it go till 12:30, and then understand that folks may need to stay longer if needed. I know we would appreciate that, because that would give us the afternoon to regroup on revisions and changes as well. Liz, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, just process. You probably are aware, we don't actually have a climate council meeting shown on our calendar for the 30th. So when you do the 29th work, or even before, you might want to update.
No, we didn't have a meeting on the 30th at all, because we have a meeting on the 1st.
Oh, it's the 1st, so it's just not on this
Yeah.
month. I apologize. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. We made it a special meeting on the 1st, the day that we had the final day to adopt, and then recognizing that we didn't have one on the 1st, Marianne and I feel like it would be better for folks who have to revise and make revisions to do it on Monday rather than Tuesday, so we would
Sure.
have a full day to do that.
I got it. I'm caught up with you now. I was looking at our calendar and confused. Okay.
That's great.
Well,
That's great.
okay, great.
Okay, that's great. And so my other request is that we don't have any meetings scheduled after December 1st right now. And so my suggestion is that we schedule 2 Tuesday meetings on the 7th and 14th for regularly scheduled council meetings before perhaps we take a hiatus for a month as a council. But you'll recall at our, not the last steering committee meeting, but the steering committee meeting before, and you'll also see reflected in the draft online around funding right now, that we're going to have a specific timeline to meet around prioritizing and lifting up the recommendations of the council for ARPA funding. And it would be best, based on the governor's timeline, the budget, Secretary Clouser can speak to this way better than I can, that the council prioritize and make our recommendations based on the ARPA funding allotted for the implementation of the climate action plan before we break for the holidays and before the legislature comes back. So I'd like to suggest that we have 2 meetings in December on those Tuesdays focused on ARPA funding, but also to start to break down and understand what the next steps for the council are and consider a schedule as we reconvene in the new year.
That makes sense to me, Jay. One of the things, and hopefully by then, maybe by then, we'll have more of the detailed guidance from the Treasury. That's been my biggest concern about having the ARPA discussion is, I mean, right now we're even advising towns and along with Vermont League of Cities and Towns to hold off a lot of, make any real detailed decisions until we see what the final guidance is. But we could at least, go ahead and start doing some broader outlines, I reckon.
Jared?
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's good to look ahead, agree with certainly the December 7th date. I know it's just a little difficult because I know a lot of the previous ones we had set based on doodle polls. I know, for instance, I have a quarterly board meeting on the 14th, but if I'm the only one, then I certainly wouldn't want to hold it up. But I wonder if it is worth, since so many of these meetings were set based, on a scheduling poll a long time ago, if it's worth doing a scheduling poll that would both be for at least one of the meetings in December and then also going forward into the new year, because I know that
I think we're losing you a bit, Jared. I know you're traveling right now. I am happy if the steering committee would like us to do a poll around timing, but and date. I will appreciate that the polling that we've done in the past was for consensus around meeting day and time, and know that Tuesday afternoons for the council was the best time based on consensus, based on folks' teaching schedules, other standing meetings. Certainly happy after the new year to reconsider when the council meets going forward, but wonder if, since Tuesday afternoons has been the best time, if we stick with Tuesday afternoons for the month of December, knowing that was the scheduled time. Sounds good. Thank you. And I'm just proposing the 7th and 14th for now, thinking that we won't need the 21st also. Hoping that we won't need the 21st also. Marion and I aren't getting a Thanksgiving, so I'm definitely going to have a holiday break. Okay, well, knowing that we just scheduled 3 new council meetings and lots to do, I appreciate you all sticking with it, and hope if you have any suggestions on how to format or frame up the conversation for Tuesday and Wednesday's meeting, don't hesitate to reach out to David or I or Marion about that suggested approach, so that we can lift up and ensure that councilors understand how important it is for them to raise issues and questions, knowing how close we are to December 1st. Chris, go ahead.
Jane, on the 29th, I would just suggest folk be prepared, and I don't know to what extent folk need any tutoring around this. To the extent that we're going to have to make decisions without consensus and actually go to vote, that'd be really tight with motions, amendments, votes, so that you can move through stuff. I mean, really kind of parliamentary order. Otherwise, it could just take forever. You can't really have if we're going to start voting on things, depending on how many. If it's just a few, it's not going to be that big a deal. But if it winds up being a list, it could really drag out the process if it's not really tight. So I only bring it up because I'm guessing a lot of us have, or maybe all of us, have kind of used that parliamentary procedure and understand how it works. But if not, and if it looks like we're heading towards having to have a lot of votes, we may need to pull together just a brief tutorial about how that works, if folk feel like that's what we're going to have to do.
I completely agree. Having bared witness to one of the subcommittees attempt voting recently, and it's challenging to say the least. And I think having a clear process of what you're voting on and how we're raising that will be important as a reminder for folks. So thank you. Hearing no other comment, I'm happy to move to public comment and see if there is any today. Well, I think then I can say for the first time in a long time that we can adjourn exactly on time. So thank you all for everything that everybody's doing right now. Really appreciate it, and look forward to the meetings next week. Have a
Good
nice
weekend,
weekend, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.